The fluorescent lights of the underground station flickered with a rhythmic, buzzing hum that seemed to echo the weariness in Alex's bones as he pushed his heavy mop across the salt-stained tiles. For hours every night, he worked in the shadows of the city's bustling veins, a silent observer of thousands of lives rushing past him, none of whom ever stopped to see the man behind the uniform. Alex was a single father who had once been a highly skilled mechanical engineer, but a sudden economic collapse and the loss of his wife had forced him into a life of survival, working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over his young daughter's head. He spent his breaks looking at a crumpled photo of little Mia, her bright smile being the only fuel that kept him moving through the damp, cold tunnels. He had learned to embrace his invisibility, finding a strange kind of peace in the quiet service of others, unaware that his life of struggle was about to intersect with a destiny that would change everything he knew about hope and human kindness. The air in the station grew colder as the final train of the night departed, leaving behind a haunting silence that was suddenly shattered by a muffled cry for help near the far end of the platform. Alex dropped his mop and ran toward the sound, his instincts as a protector taking over despite the exhaustion that threatened to pull him down. There, slumped against a rusted metal pillar, was a woman who looked utterly defeated, her expensive coat torn and her eyes filled with a mixture of terror and deep, agonizing sorrow. Her name was Elaine, and she had just been targeted by a group of thieves who had taken her purse, her phone, and every bit of her security, leaving her stranded in a part of the city she didn't know. To the rest of the world, she was a powerful executive, but in that moment, she was just a vulnerable soul lost in the dark. Alex knelt beside her, not as a cleaner or a stranger, but as someone who understood the exact weight of feeling like the world had finally decided to break you. Without a second thought, Alex took off his worn work jacket and draped it over Elaine's shivering shoulders, the warmth of the fleece providing a small barrier against the biting subterranean wind. He spoke to her in a low, grounding voice, promising her that she was safe now and that he wouldn't leave her side until she reached her destination. When he realized she had no way to get home and no money for a taxi, Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out his last $20, money he had painstakingly saved for Mia's school shoes. He didn't hesitate for a single second. He walked her to the ticket booth, bought her a pass, and used the remaining change to buy her a hot tea and a small sandwich from a vending machine. He stayed with her until the emergency transit vehicle arrived, offering her words of encouragement that felt like a lifeline. He didn't ask for her name or her number, believing that a true act of kindness loses its value the moment you expect a return on it. Months passed, and the memory of the night in the subway became a quiet, glowing coal in the back of Alex's mind, a reminder that even in his lowest state, he still had the power to help someone else. However, his financial situation had grown even more desperate, and with a heavy heart, he decided to apply for an entry-level technician position at a world-renowned engineering firm that had recently opened its headquarters nearby. He walked into the towering glass skyscraper feeling like an intruder, his hands calloused, and his suit a decade out of style, surrounded by young graduates who looked down on him with subtle disdain. He sat in the waiting area for hours, rehearsing his technical knowledge and praying for a chance to finally use his mind again. When his name was eventually called, he walked into the interview room with his head held high, determined to prove that a man's worth is measured by his resilience rather than the title on his previous paycheck. The large mahogany door swung open, and Alex stepped into an office that overlooked the entire city, a space filled with light and the scent of success. Sitting behind the desk was a woman whose presence commanded the entire room, her sharp eyes scanning a pile of blueprints with professional precision. As she looked up to begin the interview, the air in the room seemed to freeze. It was Elaine. She stared at Alex, her gaze moving from his face to his hands, and then to the small, faint scar on his forehead that she had memorized during the darkest hour of her life. The silence stretched for a long minute, a bridge of recognition forming between the polished executive and the man who had mopped floors to survive. Elaine rose from her chair, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of shock and profound gratitude. She didn't see a job applicant. She saw the hero who had given her his last dollar when she had absolutely nothing left to give the world. Elaine walked around the desk and stood before Alex, her voice trembling slightly as she addressed the stunned panel of interviewers who were waiting for her to speak. "This man doesn't need to be interviewed for a technician role," she stated, her tone ringing with an undeniable authority. She then turned to Alex and told him that she had spent months trying to find the subway angel who had saved her, but because he had left without a word, she feared she would never be able to repay him. She revealed that she was the CEO of the firm and that she had been looking for a chief technical officer who possessed not only brilliant engineering skills, but also the integrity and courage to lead with empathy. She offered him the position on the spot, along with a signing bonus that was more money than Alex had seen in his entire life. She told him that his kindness had given her the strength to rebuild her life, and now it was her turn to help him rebuild his. The transformation of Alex's life was nothing short of a miracle, a whirlwind of new beginnings that felt like a vivid dream. He moved Mia out of their cramped, damp apartment and into a beautiful home filled with sunlight and books, a place where she could finally run and play without fear. He excelled in his new role, using his years of practical experience and his rediscovered engineering genius to revolutionize the firm's safety protocols and community outreach programs. He became known as a leader who cared for his employees as human beings first, often walking through the maintenance departments to personally thank the staff for their hard work. He never forgot the cold tiles of the subway station, and he used his newfound wealth to establish a foundation that provided housing and job training for single parents. He realized that his period of struggle hadn't been a punishment, but a preparation for a life of service that reached far beyond his own family. The final scene of the story finds Alex and Elaine standing on the balcony of their new community center, watching the city lights twinkle below them like a field of fallen stars. Mia is playing nearby, her laughter a sweet melody that echoes against the glass walls. Alex looks at his hands, which are still strong but no longer stained with the grime of the tunnels, and he feels a deep, abiding sense of peace. He realizes that the dollar he gave away in the dark had returned to him 1,000,000 times over, not just in money, but in the love and respect he now shared with the world. Elaine places a hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared, a bond forged in the shadows of a subway station and polished to a shine in the light of a new day. They had proven that in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, a single act of selfless kindness is the only force capable of turning the tide of fate.